I'm David Alpern. I didn't realize I already knew Stan Herman before I met him on a tennis court for the first time. I didn't realize it when I met him there the second time or the third. It was only when I saw his Mr. Mort email address that I realized he was the least laughed at guest on the most watched David Susskind TV show ever, titled How to Be a Jewish Son, back in 1970. Even when he was recalling with suitable chagrin how his mother removed the door from his bedroom and the lock from the bathroom, banishing pubescent privacy forever and producing, I quote, most embarrassing moments. Of course, it was hard to win any Wisecrack Award on a panel that was dominated by madman Mel Brooks, actor George Segal, humorist Dan Greenberg, Nora Ephron's first husband. You can watch it all on YouTube. Also, I didn't know I knew Stan's work. He still sells his women's loungewear and sleepwear personally and with feeling on QVC cable, until I learned he also created the uniforms we all see on employees of Federal Express, JetBlue, McDonald's, and other inescapable corporate giants. Fashion was not the strangest calling for a boy whose father was in the silk business. Born in Brooklyn, raised in Passaic, Stan studied at the University of Cincinnati's College of Design and Architecture, Art and Planning, and at the Trapphagen School of Fashion in New York. With time out for some singing on Broadway, although he loves opera more, he worked his way up to head designer for Mr. Mort Ready to Wear and went on to win 3 Coty Awards, fashion's Oscars. In 15 years as president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, he helped consolidate various events at New York Fashion Week under giant tents in Bryant Park, practically his own backyard. With memory refreshed from just completing a memoir provocatively titled Uncross Your Legs, Stan will tell you more about the stars and styles of his career and his views on evolving fashion. Perhaps it may be affected by the current worldwide pandemic. As for tennis, thanks to which I learned what a great guy he is, I can say only that now into his 90s, Stan Herman still plays better tennis than someone nearly 15 years younger. Damn it. Sir, the ball is in your court.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got to get my notes out here. Can everybody hear me properly without the echo? Oh, you're going to...
Yeah.
All my life, there's been something for me to stand on. To stand on. Thank you for that speech, David. And we do play tennis every Sunday. We have for how long? 5, 10, 18, 20 years? I don't know. You said a number of the things that I'm going to say, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career and then perhaps read 2 or 3 little stories from Uncross Your Legs. You're probably looking at the last living designer who walked what I call the campus of 7th Avenue back in the late 40s and early 50s. It's the area from 9th to 6th, from 34th to 40th Street. Back then, every corner had an egg cream special. Fleets of racks filled with clothing made in lofts on those streets, competing for street space with immigrant workers and chauffeur-driven owners. They competed to catch the noonday sun along 7th Avenue. I say this with a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. So many years spent shuttling from 498 7th Avenue to 512, 530, and 550. The premier buildings for the better market were the likes of Norman Norell, Pauline Trégère, Ola Cassini, Bill Blass, Annie Klein, who were making their mark on what was fast becoming the American fashion scene. It was still not quite the era of the designers. Designers were still hidden away in the back rooms. It was usually the owner's wife who was in the front for the label, True design status was reserved for the European labels, Dior, Chanel, Fat, Balenciaga. In fact, there was a large industry buying muslins from Europe and filling the stores with exact copies, or sometimes not very exact copies. Stores worshiped European design. Americans were just beginning to step away from the classicism of European design and spread their sportswear wings. Our lifestyle was not the 16-inch crushed leather glove. It was more muscular and denim friendly. My first job were in what was called the better market. My first boss was Vera Benenson, the Countess Ilinska, who dressed the ladies of Park Avenue in unforgiving brocades. My second job was for Ola Cassini, who became a very close friend many years later. But I learned my craft at a company called Martini Design. Lots of satin, lots of velvet, and tortured necklines. I also realized after I wrote this, and because it's on everybody's mind, my second job was really for Herbert Sondheim, who was Stephen Sondheim's father. And I met Stephen Sondheim when we were both in our early 20s in the showroom. His mother was the designer there. Her name was Foxy. We're talking now 1952, 53, 54, long time ago. I did know Stephen, not well, but well enough to feel the jolt of his death. To dress up then was to look older, like your mother. The flip to the other side was years away. For over a period of 10 years, I worked the design room, moving from sketcher to draper to designer. Things didn't happen quickly back then, but the time I spent in the apprentice mode proved invaluable to me. There was a moment when I walked away, frustrated by the inability to move up the ladder quickly and by the meager salary schedule. I did go into show business. I did learn how to sing. I was very lucky. The second time I auditioned for a show, I got on a Broadway show, and the second lead. It was a show called La Plume de ma Tante. Does anybody remember that? And I played it with Robert Clary, who hated me. He hated me because I looked like him, and he was right. He was really talented. I was a better designer, much better. But and then David Merrick asked me to go on the road with Parade, with Anna Maria Alberghetti. But I had already other plans in my life. I went back to 7th Avenue. At this point, I was already, and that's why I didn't go anywhere, in a serious love relationship with a man who would remain in my life for 40 years. We were together until his untimely and too quick death over 30 years ago. And in retrospect, I can honestly say that love affair was the driving force of my varied career. You'll have to read the book to find out why. In the 60s, I suddenly became the darling of the young fashion market. As president of Mr. Moore, I was churning out fashion, winning awards, air-kissing, and phoning the fashion press and making good money. After 10 years, a decade, the golden goose was mine. Then suddenly, like a meteor, the company imploded, and my design life exploded. I segued into a freelance existence. It was pure design, no manufacturing. There is a difference. When you're a manufacturer, you can become a millionaire. When you're a designer, you can become a fool. And that's what happened to me.
Or a celebrity.
Or a celebrity. And I'll give you a little story about when you fill yourself with how good you are. It was the year all the designers were asked to go out to LA. They had just opened the Baumetella store. Remember that? Baumetella? And every designer went, from Bill to Oscar to Stan, everybody went. And we all were supposed to be paired off with a movie star. And there was the era of avant-garde. There were a lot of Turner, but I had a favorite movie star. Her name was Anne Rutherford. Anybody remember Anne Rutherford? Whoa! She was the girl next door. She was in that famous the Southern movie about Gone with the Wind. She was the door. She was everybody's sweetheart. And I got to the dinner, to the luncheon, and I looked at the table, and I swear they had put her next to me. I was in heaven. I couldn't believe it. She came in late with her husband, who was a lawyer, and she looked at the table, and she looked at me, and she looked at the table, and she looked at me, and she looked down at me, and she said, "Who the fuck are you?" That really put me in my place. I never, ever again had great expectations. I picked up the pieces quickly and went to Henry Bendel with Geraldine Stutz as my partner. I attached myself to the world of intimate apparel, which I still design today. Like a thunderbolt in the 1970s, the secret to uniform design became mine. To this day, I'm still introduced as the gentleman who dresses more people than any other designer. FedEx alone has over 300,000 employees delivering your package in my uniforms design here. The list of clients is remarkable. 3 changeovers for McDonald's. I did McDonald's for 15 years. TWA, when it was vying with Pan Am as the world's greatest airline. 20 years as United Airlines designer, U.S. Airways, Eastern Airline, and for the past 15 years, since it started and called itself Taxi, I am the designer of JetBlue. And I recommend JetBlue to everybody. They actually tried to call themselves Taxi. And we talked them out of it. And then they wanted the uniform to be black with white pearls, very New York. And I designed this black and white uniform, and then named the damn airline JetBlue. So I had to switch around, and they are in the darkest blue you'll ever see. There are hotels in Vegas, mega cruise lines, Humana, all their nurses, Amtrak, and Acela. Just last year, the studio created the TWA experience, recreated this TWA experience at the glamorous new hotel at Kennedy Airport. 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, the Central Park Conservancy snuggled into my uniforms for that glorious park. And I recommend everybody go to see it. They are so good. They may be the best thing I ever did. It's nice. Aging can sometimes do good things to your design. In this last 30 years of my very varied career, I found my showbiz fach on the air at QVC. I was a natural, a frustrated singer and performer. I found a way to speak to my customer while selling my robes and loungewear. You can watch me next week, believe it or not, caressing fabric and schmoozing with the host. I'll be on tomorrow afternoon at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, right. And we have to sell, Leslie, how many we have to sell? We have to sell how many thousand? I don't know. Leslie was the woman who got me on to QVC. The numbers are astounding. Astounding. What? Well, yeah, I mean, I've sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bathrobes. I've wrapped the world, zipped the world up in my bathrobes. It's amazing. Okay, 30 years ago, as I settled into the cadence of what I call biting off the edge of fashion, avoiding the hot center, I even began thinking about the possibility of retiring with Gene to the sunny shores of Lake Como. But then he died of a heart attack. As fate would have it, at that very moment, as a longtime member of the board of the CFDA and propelled by the resignation of our president, Caroline Rome, I was thrust into that very remarkable position. You heard about the CFDA. I've invited some people from the council. After Gene died, they became sort of like my lover. I moved over, caressed them. I'm still involved with them. And truth tell, if there was an epithet written for my ashes, it would say that the CFDA president was one of the most fulfilling times of my life. It was 16 years. Thank you. It was 16 years with a remarkable board of directors. Names like Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, Calvin Klein, Mary McFadden, Carolina Herrera, Vera Wang, Oscar de la Renta, my great pal Jeffrey Banks. The executive director was Fern Mallis. Together we formed 7th on 6 to showcase American fashion. The shows were originally in Bryant Park. To this day, I still think of Bryant Park as Fashion Park. My studio overlooks its gracious alleys of London trees, plane trees. I'm on the board of Bryant Park, so I make decisions every month about what's going on in that park, how much we want to look like Orlando, and how much we want to look like a Parisian park. In the room today are the CFDA's current, you've met them, CEO Stephen Kolb and President Cassandra Diggs. I'm still treasurer, right, Cassandra? Tom Ford, who is our chairman, he gave me that position, didn't he? That's very nice. When the pandemic changed our lives, I took the time to sit down and write my memoir, Uncross Your Legs. Let me tell you what Uncross Your Legs means so you understand. When you go to a fashion show, and God knows I've seen a lot of fashion shows, at the end of the runway, at the very end of the runway, all of the photographers are there. The lights go down, and the photographers scream at the first people in the front row, "Uncross your legs!" because they want a clear sight line down that runway so that they can get their pictures for whatever publication they're working for. So Uncross Your Legs seemed the right title for me. Besides, it's got some other things going for it. Today, I think, yes, I'll be reading from it for the first time in public. I believe there's a memoir in everyone. Mine was inspired by the great Welsh writer Jan Morris. Does everybody know Jan Morrison? She wrote her last book, In My Mind's Eye, just before she left us at the age of 92. She did it, I thought I could do it too. Although the love of my life, Gene Horowitz, a writer himself, died decades ago, he remains my inspiration. If Gene and Jan are listening, I hope you enjoy what I've written. So I will read. Whoops. I'm going to fall first. The book is dedicated to Gene, and it will have sketches, and it will have, I'm a very good sketcher. It will have pictures. It's with an agent at this point. It hasn't been shown to anybody. I've held it like a child. I've nursed it for a long time. But this book was only written in a year. It was like it just flowed out of me. This is a little chapter called Probing. As I write this memoir, I keep probing, looking for the signs that led me to this long and eventually satisfying career. I hear so many designers talk of their mothers, grandmothers, and fashionable aunts who influenced their early interest in fashion. I can't say I ever wanted to dress anyone in my family except my stepmother, who I have to admit could have been a clothes horse. I never wanted to cut into the rolls of fabric in Herman's silk shop or befriend those leggy ladies in our pattern library at the store. And yet, it had to have been those pattern books that inspired me to start sketching, and my mother's innate taste. To this day, I'm happiest with pen in hand, and I've become very, very good at it. I can feel the fabric with a stroke, see the proportions with another stroke. Clothing becomes a picture to me, and I've inspired my assistants to bring life to those dimensions. I believe there are many other designers who sketch first like Karl Lagerfeld. I see his work as pretty pictures for Chanel, whereas I would hazard the guess that Balenciaga and Dior worked in fabric. The French designer I had a secret crush on was Jacques Fatt. I think his big bows got to me. I seldom intellectualized my design. It was only through Gene that I placed them in the zeitgeist. Looking back at my work at Mr. Moore, I can see the charm of my proportions and my tasteful sense of order. There are some very special moments when I put pants under dresses and found the pleating machines that dotted the New Jersey Palisades. I was ahead of the trend. But for the most part, I was working in the commercial lane, but with enough flair to excite the buyers and the press. Even today, my work on QVC has kept my design juices flowing. I believe my sketches are even better now than they were years ago. To this day, I wonder why I never kept a good record of my work, a diary of life and design. It would have been helpful in writing this memoir. Was I not proud? I've kept lots of old books and vinyl records. My career in ready-to-wear was much shorter than my uniform business and my intimate apparel world. But I realized, without the dizzying decade as a hot young designer on 7th Avenue, nothing would have happened. And what a decade it was. 60s, my moment in the hot crater. It was do-your-own-thing era. There was a new young fashion market, airborne with pot and expectation. The young designers I marched with were my very dear friends, Leo Narducci, Gail Kirkpatrick, Luba, Don Simonelli, Victor Joris, Betty Carroll, Diana Littell, Carol Horn, and Liz Claiborne. There were others too, long forgotten. The graveyard of fashion could easily fill the hillside of Queens with their tombstones. Ready to Wear was my moment, and nothing could have happened without the woman who became my muse, Barbara Larson, a graduate of Parson with her buddy Joel Schumacher, the great director. She was the assistant of my life in 1965. She was not only talented, but a great beauty who wore clothes and discarded them quickly to move on to the next challenge. She was so good, I began to depend on her and step back. And once the assistant thinks that they're responsible for the success, they have to move on or remain subservient. She moved on, and I rediscovered my mojo. There were others like the extraordinary Jan Johnson, who now designs the most lyrical greeting cards for the Museum of Modern Art, and whose talent could have made her the greatest accessory designer of the decade. Between 1965 and 72, I was airborne. Stores clamored for my merchandise. Magazines spread their legs and let me in. I was on everybody's guest list for 5 years, traveling the country, doing shows in every A-list specialty store across the country. I had the very first young designer boutique at Saks, which I overstocked and lost within a year. I won awards, little plaques and tablets that grace my house in the country and are catching dust in my apartment in New York City. I can remember when Nordstrom's was a regional shoe store with a reputation for taking merchandise back. I loved doing shows in towns like Shreveport, Richmond, San Antonio, Pittsburgh, Denver. So many stores to choose from. In addition to all these success, I had a solid love life that overpowered my desire to be out there with the shiny people. I had business partners who did not think of the big picture. If they did, they never told me. It was me who should have made the next move, and I didn't. I used to wonder if my promiscuity was one of the reasons I never became a household name. Too much energy fucking and dodging the consequences, not enough schmoozing in the air-kissed world of fashion. At this point, I believe it's important for me to come to terms with my promiscuous sex, my life that I so neatly tucked under the covers. For a guy who was married in the true sense to one man for almost 40 years, a guy who to this day measures everyone in terms of that man's attributes, I never got over my need for sex outside our relationship. Quick, anonymous, no-touch sex. I had a designer friend, Chester Weinberg, who knew that side of me and tried to entice me pre-AIDS into a full-blown operatic production of sex. Gene saw it coming and gently massaged me back to reality. He knew. He always knew. He predicted the AIDS epidemic, screaming at Chester that he was going to kill himself with the sex. He did. I believe my guilt kept me from using this chosen time to enhance my future in fashion. Now, nearing the end of my life, pounding on 93, anonymous sex still sounds intriguing. And for all those legs I've managed to uncross, I carry no shame. This one is called I'm Still Here. You've heard that, Mr. Sondheim? I'm old enough to remember the very moment I shook hands with Eleanor Roosevelt at a Democratic rally in Greenwich Village, dancing with Lana Turner, who had too much to drink and fell asleep on my shoulder. Dodging David Suskind's attempt to out me and his seminal talk show, Sons of Jewish Mothers, a show where I got down on one knee and sang to Mel Brooks. I once slipped a black smock over Gloria Swanson's head in preparation for a hat fitting at my first job as a gopher at John Fredericks. I sat on the stone cold windowsills with Truman Capote at the Everard Baths. I remember squinting at the 5-inch screen of our first television set, a Dumont made in my hometown of Passaic, New Jersey, chopping ice for our icebox and shoveling coal in our basement every few hours to keep our house warm in the winter. My brother and I listening to our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, on our party line phone, driving the first automatic car produced in America, the Oldsmobile Hydromatic, 1941, and wearing knickers and falling socks while walking the grounds of the 1939 World's Fair, while looking up at the Trilon in Perisphere, riding in my grandpa Tannenbaum's oversized Marmon touring car with the chauffeur partition in, but preferring the rumble seat in my Uncle Sonny's car, eating a Charlotte Russe on Pitkin Avenue, and riding the elevated 3rd Avenue subway looking into the lives of all the city dwellers. Over the years, I've luxuriated in the white linen service on almost every airline, swiveled in the parlor cars from Penn Station to Southampton, smoking unfiltered cigarettes, Camels, Chesterfields, and Lucky Strikes, just like they did in the movies. I remember passing by the old Metropolitan Opera House, plunked uncomfortably in the middle of the Garment Center, and looking up at my first apartment and its fire escape that I lived in 70 years ago in the heart of the village, the year that I auditioned for the Fantastics and was almost cast in the original production. I've walked Fifth Avenue in its 9 great department stores from 34th to 59th Street, B. Altman, Lord & Taylor, Russex, Best & Company, Baumgartner, DePinna, Arnold Constable, Bendel, and Bergdorf. And I'm still here. As Steve Sondheim says in Follies, working it, trying to understand why my TV remote isn't working, and how the hell do I get Netflix? I've rediscovered my thumbs and texting. I never learned how to type. My father said, Jews don't type. I am learning how to scan and print my sketches, using Zoom and Skype and playing the new party game of online living. I'm lost without backup help. Even today, Jeffrey helped me. As Tennessee Williams said, I depend on the kindness of strangers, but in my case, they're friends. I'm still in amazing shape, still riding longhand, applying makeup before going on air for QVC, walking the beaches and preparing dinners for the ribbon of house guests who have discovered my compound during this pandemic. I've blown out enough candles to light a ballroom. My mind is clear, even if my step has lost some bounce. That's the end of that story. One more story, and that's it. Uncross Your Legs. The story is called Uncross Your Legs. It's the end of the book, but it'll give you an idea. I've come to the end of this memoir, and I'm finding it hard to let go. Not because I fear endings, more because writing it has given me a safe haven this past year, and I've enjoyed it. Though this year was one of the most complicated I've ever lived through, I had my first operation at the age of 91 and was one of the most likely candidates for infection during the pandemic. There was the shock of the exodus from New York, the city I so love, and transitioning to full-time living in the house that I always thought would be my final resting place. Somehow, the slower pace that nature demands has given me the time to write, to feed my ducks, stretch my living quarters to accommodate close friends and their dogs, rediscover the beaches, the farm stands, the best butcher in town, and where to get my shirts ironed. There was a week that QVC booked me twice on their late-night primetime shows. It was the same week I was left to my own devices, no one at the house to help me make my home a stage set. Yes, I was no longer driving down to the QVC headquarters to go on air. Everything now done through Skype. Although my good friend Grant had artfully rehearsed this aging motor moron, and he felt confident I could do it myself, I didn't feel confident at all. He had plugged the plug, set the lights, opened the computer, and all I had to do was press the green button and look into the camera. While waiting for my cue for the show producer that would link me back to the world, my mind began to wander. Here I was in my 10th decade, dressed from the waist up in a 4-ply navy cashmere sweater, looking into a camera that would connect me to 100 million households in a room so private that I didn't have to wear pants at all if I wanted to. Surrounded by all the stuff I've collected over the years, sitting next to a vase filled with searching sunflowers and holding in my hand a lucky owl figure that I had bought in Greece. In front of me was the picture that I had painted 50 years ago of our hot waterless shack and the 150 bird figurines I have collected, sitting comfortably on the many window ledges of the house. I rubbed my eyes, smudging the Kevin Aucoin concealer cream that the lady at White's Apothecary had forced on me as a gift, little sample packets that would mask my aging dark spots. I've been cruising through the years, piling up moments of pleasure and pain that these walls were familiar with, crossing my right leg over the left. I waited. Every minute seemed eternal. The green light was not yet green. The one thought that seemed to hang in the air was just how much I loved my privacy, and how I was able to find that in the very public world of fashion. Nothing could have revealed that lifestyle better than this very moment, alone, with my legs crossed, waiting to enter this center stage and uncrossing my legs in front of the largest audience of my life. My friend James, the gentleman who does my horoscope, has always told me about my moon in Scorpio being in my 5th house and how it has turned this very private Virgo into a proscenium arch queen once the camera starts to roll. This was to be a 12-minute hit, set aside for my zip front row, my most popular item in my arsenal of at-home loungewear. When the lights went on, I uncrossed my legs, pitched my voice higher, and greeted the two hosts, Leah and Sean, with my usual abundance of energy. We sold over 4,000 pieces in 12 minutes, way beyond the expected goal, and I was a hero once more. At the very end of the sell, the producer said, "We need more Stan Herman on the evening shows." Oh, yes, you do. It was midnight, and this Cinderella was ready to slip out of his cashmere and wrap himself in the fluff of blankets in his bedroom. There was always a fire in the fireplace. How decadent and earthy to fall asleep to a flickering flame. On my way upstairs, I suddenly realized that my left foot had fallen asleep from all of the crossing and uncrossing. I wondered if any of those front row A-listers at the fashion shows had collapsed in pain just as I did. Has writing this memoir given me the secret to uncrossing my legs? Have the private parts of my life respected the public parts, and vice versa? I wonder if Jan Morris was able to uncross her legs way up there in Wales. I wonder how much longer I will be enjoying this simple action, placing one leg over the other and comfortably dangling my toes in midair. How long before both feet fall asleep? Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have a medal for you.
Oh, you have a medal for me.
A medal. This was so delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.